Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the live Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott. It is the 24th of September, isn't time flying, and it feels like autumn is well and truly on its way towards us now with the change in the weather, at least here in the UK, over the last couple of days. So we have had some fantastic questions in from you as always, and it's absolutely brilliant to be able to have a chance to kind of answer some of those live now and also take your questions live as they come through on the feed as well. So do share the questions as they come through. But we're going to start with a question that was asked live last time and I didn't get a chance to respond to it. And this is from Karen Pitt-Bibby, who's asking, how did ancient societies get rid of politicians who annoyed them? Now, this is an excellent question. There were lots of different ways in which different ancient societies got rid of politicians who annoyed them. Now, it depends on the society, and it depends how you conceive of course, politicians, right, in that sense. So if we're thinking about the ancient Greek world, for instance, and if we think, for instance, about Athens, the fabled democracy of Athens, in that sense, everyone was a politician, weren't they? Because every male citizen, who could be a full adult citizen, was able to participate and speak forth their opinions on subjects in the assembly where everyone debated and decided what to do as a community. So really, a citizen and politician was the same thing. But there were, of course, leading citizens, people who spoke often and were often listened to. So those would be what we might call sort of demagogues in that sense. And there was a very, very, very well established, at least during the 5th century, way of dealing with any individual, politician, demagogue, etc., who was considered to be really annoying and just getting in the way of things. And that was ostracism. Now, we get our word ostracism because of the way the ancient Athenians did this. They would set up a vote. First off, was there a kind of enough of a blockage within the political system on a particular issue that was being caused by someone in particular that they wanted to have a vote, an ostracism vote? So they would vote on that first. And if they did, then they would go ahead with the vote. And then there would be a series of names of people who were thought to be a bit problematic, and people would vote by getting ostraca, shards of pottery, writing the name of their person on it that they thought should be ostracized, and then the votes would be counted up, and the person with the most votes simply had to leave Athens for a period of 10 years and simply absent themselves from the politics so that the city could come together and move forward. So this was a kind of very well known, and we know of very, very famous, important politicians and important citizens of Athens who faced ostracism, people like Themistocles, for instance, who suffered ostracism, but then could be brought back earlier than that 10-year period if it was decided, actually, we want to hear what they've got to say on this particular issue or that. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much indeed for joining in. So ostracism from ostraca, and we have some of those ostraca shards surviving. In fact, in the Museum of the Agora in Athens, there are 97, I think, different pottery shards, all bearing the name Themistocles. The mystery is they're all only written in 11 different hands. So either people were pre-writing these things to be able to give out to people for those who weren't able to write themselves, or there is some vote rigging going on. Within the Roman world, it's a different kettle of fish, because at least in the era of the Roman Republic, you've got a whole series of complex elections to political offices. These political offices are all time constrained, right? You only hold them for a certain period of time. So that's one way of getting rid of people if you've decided that they are too much. You just have to wait for their term of office to end. And of course, all the different Roman elite families, because their votes really counted more and weighed more within the voting system, because they all got to vote first. If they all ganged up to decide that somebody shouldn't get in or should get in, then absolutely they would be able to. That was how you sort of manipulated the system in Rome. Go over the other part of the world to China, ancient China, and they had a system that was actually really a set of religious beliefs that rulers had something called the mandate of heaven. When they first came to rulership, they had the mandate of heaven, and that meant that they had the right and the power to rule. But if a ruler started behaving badly, or if things started going wrong, the ruler was said to lose their mandate of heaven. And one of the things a ruler who'd lost the mandate of heaven was supposed to do was step aside. And it's really interesting that in the later Han era writings, when they talk about what the Romans are like, they actually project onto the Roman world, although they might not actually have sort of been there themselves in any direct form. They project onto the Roman world their idealized version of how rulership should work, i.e. when somebody is sort of no longer doing good, they should recognize that and they should step aside peacefully, amiably, and just go off into the sunset. So Karen, thank you so much for your absolutely great question. Lots of different ways of doing it. Ruth Bullivant has also been in touch saying, did the Romans think the Greeks were greater than them? What a brilliant question. Did the Romans think the Greeks were greater than them? Well, the Roman-Greek relationship is a really interesting one because it's a bit of a sort of give and take and depending on the field and in area in which you're talking about. If you think militarily, the Romans definitively did not think the Greeks were greater than them. After all, the Romans conquered the Greeks very effectively during the course of the sort of end of the 3rd century and into the 2nd century BCE. And of course, 146 BCE is a famous date in Greek history because that's when the Romans just came along and trashed the city of Corinth, for instance. And sort of subjected Greece to Roman rule. But we get the great quote by Horace, the Roman writer Horace in his epistles, where he talks about this. He says, captive Greece captured her uncouth conqueror and brought the arts to rustic Latium, i.e. captive Greece may have been captured, but actually it in turn ended up capturing its conqueror, Rome, by bringing the cultural arts to what had been up to that point a very rustic, kind of uncultured Italy. So this idea that Greece may not have been militarily superior, but definitely was culturally superior. And that is a sort of chip on Rome's shoulder that continues all the way through Rome's history. Greece continues to occupy this space of intense cultural appreciation. Now, on the one hand, that turns Greece into a bit of a Disneyland for Roman citizens, rich Roman citizens who go to Greece to do a sort of finishing school year in philosophy, culture, and art, and rhetoric, and all these things, and then go home to be hardy Romans again. But it also means that Greece holds its own, even though it's a relatively small part of the Roman Empire. And it's interesting that in Strabo's oikoumene, his description of the entire known world as it stands, which is written in the 1st century CE, books 8 to 9 of his 17-book oikoumene, which focus on Greece in books 8 to 9, contain more references to artworks, cultural monuments, religion, etc., than any other part of his entire oikoumene geography. So really Greece does stand out. So Julie Masca is asking, did children go to school in ancient Greece? Yes, indeed they did, depending on their family status. If they were very elites, they might well have either a private tutor they went to in small groups, or a private tutor would be living in the home with them, homeschooling. But also, of course, depending on which city-state you were in, you had a different kind of educational system. So if you were in Sparta, absolutely every male child, and indeed female child, kind of had a very well programmed educational experience, and for the male child that meant they went in to the competitive system of the agoge, where they learned over the next decade or so, completely cut off from their parents, how to be a Spartan warrior. Girls equally had an important educational system which focused as much on their athletical ability as it did on their literacy, numeracy, etc. Because, given that Spartan warriors were so often off fighting, actually women had to take on important aspects of running the Spartan state. So in that sense, there were a kind of equal education for both sides. Hello from Madrid. Thank you, Rose, so much for joining us indeed. Absolutely great questions coming in. And I wanted also to flag, we had a great question last time from Alia Soliman, who's lecturer of classical studies, talking about teaching Sophocles and Antigone this term and wanting thoughts on good contemporary adaptations to show to the students. And thank you for all your responses that we've put up on the Facebook page. So Alia, if you're looking, do have a check out of the responses there on the Facebook page for some great ideas of how to teach Sophocles and Antigone. We've had some questions come in over the course of this week talking about where to go and see when you're on holiday. Now, I'm loving this sort of slightly kind of wishful thinking about getting away on holiday in this kind of COVID era that we're on. But Caroline Nicklin has been in touch saying they're planning next year. That's good. Build in a buffer, Caroline. A trip to Italy. You're going to Paestum, Herculaneum. They're already on your list. But what would be the one place you would suggest that isn't obvious? Well, if you're going to be in that part of Italy, Caroline, if you're going to be down near Paestum, Herculaneum, then I would say go to Baia, just near Pompeii and Herculaneum in the Bay of Naples. Go to Baia, the ancient seaside town of Baia. Go and see the baths at Baia, the biggest, most impressive set of geothermal hot springs in Italy, and also then take the opportunity to go and see Italy's only underwater archaeological site in Baia, where if you can scuba dive, you can actually scuba dive down to see some of the now submerged elite Roman villas that once were clustered around the bay of Baia, or indeed if you can't scuba dive, you can snorkel and see some stuff, or you can go out in a glass-bottom boat as well. So do have a look at that, Caroline. So Caroline's off to Italy, lucky Caroline. But then we also had, now where is it? Zach Coles, we may have missed you. You came in last week and I didn't get a chance to answer this question. You're flying off to Preveza at the weekend up in northwestern Greece. Is there anything I should look for out of interest other than the big name places? Zach, so you're not too far from Actium. Get to the battle site of Actium, where Augustus built a fantastic temple on the mainland to commemorate his great sea victory just off the coast at Actium. That brought him final conquest and victory as he united the Roman world underneath himself. So Zach, if you're off to Greece to Preveza, go and see Actium. If there's other great places that you're intending to travel to, thinking about traveling to, dreaming about traveling to, do always get in touch and let us know kind of where you're heading off to. And of course, send in pictures as well that you're sharing, both on the Community Classics page that we run associated with this page, but also with us on the Facebook page as well. So Caroline's off to Baia, Zach is off to Preveza. Sarah Scotty has just been watching a new episode of Puppet History, which features the Royal Mint and counterfeit coins. And this got me wondering, Sarah, if such things existed in the classical age. Yes, absolutely. Warwick Classics, where I work, is actually one of the centres of numismatics, the study of coinage from antiquity. And yes, we can tell you that there were such things as naughty counterfeit coins in antiquity as well, and people trying to get away with cheating others. And indeed, one of the things that you'll see any good trader having in any trading emporia or port, or indeed even on board ships, the trading ships as they go around, is they'll have a good, very good set of scales. And now, in order to be able to weigh the coins that they're receiving, in part to know whether their weight is what they should be, because of course most of the time within the ancient world we're dealing with a coinage which is sort of worth its weight in gold, so to speak, or whatever material it's made out of. So yes, you definitely they were on the lookout for counterfeits, but it's not just coinage that is being created where there are sort of slight frauds afoot. One of the greatest things that I've ever seen is if you go to the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, they have a case of what are called lekithoi, which is a particular type of vase, Greek vase, vessel, that was painted white and then with images painted on top of that, but it was used expressly in funerary processions. And you were supposed to fill up these lekithoi full of very expensive perfumed olive oil, for instance, which you would then put into the grave with the deceased after they were buried, committing that often very expensive gift you're offering to them in the afterlife. But when they started X-raying some of these lekithoi, they found that even because they get absolutely enormous, and you'd think, my God, that's an enormous thing to have to carry for one thing, but also to fill up with expensive olive oil. What a massive expense that would be. And of course, people carrying big lekithoi would look like very generous, very wealthy people. But when they x-rayed some of these bigger ones, what they realised was that there was, just on the inside of the top, where you would pour in the oil, there was a little test tube. So all you had to do was fill up this little test tube, and it would look like the whole of the lekithos was filled with olive oil, when actually the rest of it was just filled with cheap air Tut, tut, tut. So people were clearly more interested in showing off to their contemporaries than they were necessarily in honouring the dead in true form with the size of their gift. And always, of course, the gods would be able to see what kind of fraudulent things they were up to. So Sarah, thank you so much for that great question. And indeed, if you guys have come across any other types of fraudulent behaviour from the ancient world, then do let us know. Send in your examples and we'll collect some stories of dodgy, fraudulent, counterfeit behaviour going on in the ancient world. So we're going to take a quick break just to talk about some of the things that are going on around the world linked to the ancient world at the moment. So you may have seen this on BBC News, that one of the largest Romano-British temples has been found in Norfolk. It's a 2nd century CE temple site near Caistor St Edmund, near Norwich, and it's a true scale. It's only just emerging, even though we've actually known about it for sort of 50, 60 years. And it seems to have been built by the Iceni tribe, whose leader, of course, was Boudicca, became very well known for the Roman rebellion back in the 1st century, so well after Boudicca, and this is kind of when the Roman influence on Britain is well and truly firmly in place. And this is a 20 metre by 20 metre Romano-British temple. And this is where what they've done is they've taken some of the skills and architectural forms of Roman building, but they've actually then morphed these to suit particular British forms of worship. So they've created this kind of amalgamation of Roman and British architectural form and religious experience and ritual to create these temple shapes that really only do exist within Britain in the Roman period. Absolutely brilliant. National Geographic has talked about how they've unearthed a 2,600-year-old wine factory in Lebanon. I've been hearing apparently that in the news that during COVID and lockdown, our drinking has increased exponentially. It sounds like we could do with a good wine factory near us as well. This one is by the ancient Phoenicians, of course, who were based out of this part of the Levant, modern-day Middle East, before spreading along the north coast of Africa, famously found in Carthage, and morphing into the Carthaginians. So well done, those Phoenicians, with their winemaking. And then thanks to Helen Pecod for sharing this from the Hearts Advertiser. But Herculaneum Park is going to, in the UK, is going to get a £250,000 new playground. Yes, it's going to have 30 features divided into zones that reflect the city's rich history. It's going to have a Roman-style basilica, a mini amphitheatre, a market street. Oh, I can't wait to go and see this. This looks absolutely brilliant. I think we should all have a group trip for Herculaneum, indeed. And then what else have we got going on in the world? Yes, we've talked about and flagged this from the Hindu newspaper as well, just thinking about that bigger ancient global world again, that they found further evidence of Roman interaction down in the southern part of India. So that's in the area of modern-day Kerala. Thinking about the Roman period, the ancient Tamil kingdoms were in charge in that part of the world. And they found new evidence in terms of artifacts at an 111-acre archaeological site in Paestum that speak to kind of the Romans being in the area. And that's kind of mini statues as well as seal rings, etc. So kind of it's great to see even more evidence of this long-term connection between the Mediterranean and Indian worlds going forward. And then something a little bit further back in time in Saudi Arabia, human footprints. 7 footprints have been found on an ancient lake bed in northern Saudi Arabia, attesting to human presence in the region 115,000 years ago. Wow, there we go. Absolutely brilliant. Some things that are coming up that you might want to take advantage of. If you fancy getting your Greek on a little bit and learning a little bit more ancient Greek, then can we recommend that Stephen Kennedy, who's head of classics at Harrow School, is going to be running free weekly Greek to GCSE sessions all online for teachers who want to continue to develop their knowledge and understanding of GCSE Greek. So these will be going via Zoom, Thursday evenings, 7 to 8 p.m. UK time, starting from the 1st of October. Do get involved. Stephen's an absolute legend. And of course, if you've got some time on Thursday, the 15th of October, do sign up to come along to me talking about Roman DIY. I'm going to be talking about Roman DIY disasters, and how people looked after their gardens, all inspired by the fact, of course, that we've all turned to doing DIY and looking after our gardens during lockdown. So I'm doing that talk for Classics for All. It's free to attend online. You need to sign up and register. If you go to the link that we've got on the Facebook page. You can first register on a Google Doc, and then once you've got your space confirmed, they'll send you the Zoom link to be able to join in on Zoom. The chat I did with Nina Ramirez is kind of still online for the Gloucester History Festival about, it was about all things to do with engaging the wider world in the study of the ancient world, along with a little bit about ancient global discoverers. And that is available to watch online through until the 15th of October. So if you haven't had a chance to see it, do go and have a look at that. And then after that, straight away, come for some Roman DIY, and we'll be catching up about that. So again, lots and lots of great questions have been coming in. So sorry if these have come in a week or two ago and I haven't had a chance to get to them. Viviane Anthrax been asking, she's curious about music in the ancient world. And my response would be to Google anything to do with Armand Dangour, who is the doyen of all other things ancient music. And you can actually see some great YouTube clips of orchestras that have come together using replica ancient musical instruments to recreate, to the best of our abilities, what we think ancient music to have sounded like. And it is, to be fair, it is quite an acquired taste, I have to say, but it's certainly an interesting one to understand. Mamushi Frol has asked, what is your favourite archaeological site? Here we go. So I'm putting this one out here to all of you guys. Let's have a bit of a poll. We'll have a bit of a competition over the course of the week. Shout out what is your favourite archaeological site on the Facebook page, and then we will run a poll to see whether these things are moving and shifting. I know we've talked about favourite archaeological sites around the world before, but have people got a new one? Is there a new winner? It's a bit like the sort of weekly musical charts for what is number one. We probably won't do it on a week by week basis, but certainly every 6 months or so we'll see whether something new has come on the market to rise up through the ranks. Kind of thinking with my university hat on, we're sort of always looking to see what the university rankings are and where the university sits in the rankings. So let's do it with some ancient sites. For me, actually, my favourite would be Delos. Rahul thinks it's Delphi. No. I would probably say Delos, actually. It's probably my favourite archaeological site indeed. And we also had Mihaela Vilaya talking to us about the Emperor Trajan and asking about his bridge over the Danube. Now, I was amazed to see this today. Was thinking, actually, we saw on the classicist list, which is an email list you can join for kind of anyone involved in classics within the sort of school and university world. And there was a shout out from the classics department at the University of Belgrade in Serbia today asking about people offering exemplars of their taught master's courses and focusing on classical civilization and ancient history. So kind of absolutely brilliant to see classics alive and well in this heartland of what was actually the birthplace of a good number of Roman emperors, right? So actually they're coming from the Balkans indeed. And here was Emperor Trajan when he's back in the time of his Dacian Wars. So this is at the very beginning of the 2nd century CE, 105 AD, the Second Dacian War. And he had to get his troops across the Danube. How was he going to do that? Well, of course, you build a bridge. There's lots of great stories through Mediterranean ancient history of rulers having to build big bridges to get their troops across. Of course, famously thinking in the Greek world, it's Xerxes building his bridge of ships across the Hellespont to get his troops round to come and fight the Persian wars. And of course, his first bridge got knocked down by the waves, and he supposedly whipped the sea to punish it for its insubordination. Built a second bridge, which did survive, but of course, he got his comeuppance in the end. Hubris always attracts some nemesis. But it looks like Trajan was much more sort of sensible about this, and his bridge that he eventually constructed was also known as the Bridge of Apollodorus at the early 2nd century CE, and this was the architect who constructed a bridge using a series of arches crossing these great enormous posts that were pillared into the riverbed, and there were 20 or so of these pillars constructed across the Danube, which meant that they could then construct arches that spanned about sort of 38 to 40 meters each between them, creating a bridge that was in total some extraordinary length of just over 1,000 meters long, 15 meters wide, going 19 meters high into the air. And this was the bridge that they were able to take the troops across on. And you can amazingly still in the Danube today. If you go scuba diving and it's good water clarity conditions, you can still see some of the remaining posts from Trajan's bridge across the Danube. So Mila, thank you so much indeed for that great question. And trying to catch up on one or two more other questions that we've had in. Alexis Brown has been asking a question about a moral question that's been bothering her for a while, so I'm so sorry that it's taken a little bit of time for us to get back to you. You're talking about the cycles of hubris nemesis, or rather kind of how kind of doing something always attracts your own punishment. So Agamemnon sacrifices his daughter Iphigenia, Clytemnestra kills Agamemnon, Oedipus then has to, he kills his father unknowingly, Medea kills her brother, Orestes kills his mother, and you're worried about whether or not others seem to get away with this cycle of death or not. Kind of why do some of the others seem to get away with it when Orestes gets pursued by the Furies, poor Orestes. And you're like, so it's an interesting one, isn't it, to think through. So Agamemnon sort of ends up sacrificing his daughter and then supposedly partly because of that gets killed by his wife Clytemnestra. Don't forget, Clytemnestra does then get her comeuppance because she's killed by her children Orestes and Electra, and then so she gets her comeuppance. So Orestes and Electra, particularly Orestes, then have to face the Furies and are kind of, if you like, they want to punish Orestes, but they are finally adjudicated, judged in a trial in Athens that kind of allows the sort of punishment to be satiated, to say that enough is enough. So there is a clear marker. The one I think you're right about, Alexis, that is a bit weird is Medea. Because there she is, deciding to kill her own children in order to get back at her husband for going off with a younger woman. And the end of the play, Euripides' Medea, has Medea swanning off into the sunset, supposedly looked after by the gods. So where's the punishment there, indeed? What are we left to think? That this was a justifiable action in some way or shape or form? And it really is, that myth, an absolutely extraordinary story in terms of what Medea is allowed to get away with. So I think there's some good moral questions to be thought about there indeed. And then Carolyn, you've actually had two questions in today, but you're lucky. Carolyn Nicklin asked a couple of weeks ago about human beings have been throwing valuables into water for thousands of years. Are there any other superstitions that have existed in the classical world and made it through to now? Right? And I think this is an absolutely really interesting topic. Kind of, are there those superstitions that have morphed across cultures, time frames, religions, to still have some kind of force for us today? And it often does happen because when new religions come into play, they will often sort of try to adapt and bolt themselves onto or align themselves in some way with some of the previous religious experiences, beliefs, in order to make them more palatable and acceptable as a new religious force. We see this ultimately with Christianity coming in as part of the Roman Empire and trying to map itself in some ways onto some of the major festivals that the Romans were used to celebrating. But it seems to have also happened with superstition. So things like walking under a ladder, we think this might even date back to ancient Egypt, where it was thought of as this kind of creation of the sacred triangle. You can't walk through the sacred triangle. The number 13 being unlucky, we can date that back all the way to Norse mythology, sort of going forward. And it's slightly not in the value of superstition, but where one example I really love of the way something's kind of influenced the way we still talk is to think about salt. Right now, salt had a value, right? A value as a commodity, and actually your salarium in Latin speak was your salt money. So our salary comes from your salt money, and the expression kind of not worth his salt kind of dates back to the Roman era and to writers like Petronius. So there we go. You kind of see this in lovely sense of the way of expressions have continued through to join us as part of our world. Hello, Laura from Romania. Hello, Patricia. How are you guys doing? Are we out of time? We are almost out of time. Is there time for one more very quick question? Debbie Clifton, you asked about if the Greeks had a grain and fish-based diet, as we were talking about 2 weeks ago, how do we then understand the suitors in the Odyssey, particularly all their meat, feasting? Well, we have to sort of separate out a little bit here the time periods we're talking about, because when we're talking about the Iliad and the Odyssey coming into force as a sort of epic poem in around the, say, 7th, 8th, 7th centuries BCE, but actually located in a time much earlier than that, particularly the era we're talking about, the era of the Mycenaean ruler palace elite, when these people was a much, much smaller group of people who were claiming a lot more of the resources and would definitely have been able to have meat more regularly than by the time you get into the classical world that we were talking about and thinking about the much larger communities, say, of democratic Athens. But then you also asked for an example of the type of fish that one might get in the market in Athens, in democratic Athens, that might then lead people to think that you weren't particularly democratic. And here we have to think about the works of Aristophanes, who quotes about, in one of his plays, absolutely brilliant, sort of, the fish sellers are going, if you go for a grouper, for instance, well, that would make people think that you were on for tyranny and not very democratic indeed. So Debbie, thank you so much indeed for your question. We are out of time already. Our half hour is up. I'm so sorry that we haven't got to some of your great questions that have come in, but they will stay on the list and hopefully I will get to them next time. When is next time? Next time is going to be Thursday, the 8th of October, so in 2 weeks' time, and we're going to be going for 5 p.m. UK time on Thursday, the 8th of October. So I'm very, very much looking forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, I hope that you enjoy some of the things that we've flagged that are upcoming, and I hope that you can very much join me both on the 8th and then on the 15th of October as well for Roman DIY. In the meantime, do get your thoughts coming in, obviously, about your favourite archaeological sites. Let's have that kind of competition. And of course, do, if you're off on your travels, if you are able to travel somewhere, we can all live vicariously through you. Please do let us know about where you get to and send in some photos. Until then, we'll see you next time. Take care.